Now, muses, who are the guardians of poets, tell us, for you know, and nothing from ancient times is hidden from you, how it came to be that the island surrounded by the Tiber River introduced the son of Caronus into the sacred rites of the city of Romulus. A terrible plague had once infected the air of Latium, and the pale bodies were deformed by a disease that dried up the blood. When they were exhausted from so many deaths, they found that human efforts were useless, and that the skill of doctors had no effect. They sought help from heaven. They went to Delphi, which is the center of the world, the oracle of Apollo, and begged him to help their distressed situation with a response that would bring health and end the suffering of such a great city. The place, the laurels, and the quivers it has all shook at the same time, and the tripod gave this answer from the depths of the sanctuary, striking awe into their astonished hearts. What you seek here, O Roman, you could have sought closer to home. And now seek it closer to home. You don't need Apollo to lessen your grief, but the son of Apollo. Go with good luck and invite my son. After the wise Senate received the commands of the deity, they asked which city the young son of Apollo lived in, and they sent some to reach the coasts of Epidaurus with the winds. As soon as those sent had reached them in the curved ship, they went to the council and the Greek elders, and begged them to grant them the divinity, who by his presence could end the mortality of the Ausonian nation, for the infallible response had directed so. Their opinions were divided and differed. Some thought that help should not be refused. Many refused it, and advised them not to part with their own protector and to give up their own guardian deity. While they were debating, twilight had now driven out the fading day, and the shadow of the earth had brought darkness over the world. When in your sleep the saving God seemed, O Roman, to be standing before your bed, just as he is usually in his temple, and, holding a rustic staff in his left hand, he seemed to be stroking the long hair of his beard with his right, and to utter these words from his kind heart: Lay aside your fears, I will come, and I will leave these my statues. Only observe now this serpent, which with its coils wraps around this staff, and accurately mark it with your eyes, so that you may be able to recognize it again. Into this I will be transformed, but I will be greater, and I will appear to be of a size as great as that into which heavenly bodies should be transformed. Immediately, with these words, the god departs, and with his words and the god, sleep departs, and a pleasant light follows upon the departure of sleep. The following morning has now dispersed the starry fires. Uncertain what to do, the nobles meet together in the grand temple of the god then sought, and beseech him to indicate, by heavenly signs, in what place he would wish to reside. Hardly have they well ceased, when the god, all glittering with gold, in the form of a serpent, with crest erect, sends forth a hissing, as a notice of his approach, and in his coming he shakes both his statue, the altars, the doors, the marble floor, and the gilded roof, and as far as the chest he stands erect in the middle of the temple, and rolls around his eyes that sparkle with fire. The frightened crowd is alarmed. The priest, having his pure hair bound with a white band, recognizes the deity and exclaims, "The god! Behold the god! Whoever you are that are present, be of good omen, both with your words and your feelings. May you, most beautiful one, be seen to our advantage, and may you aid the nations that perform your sacred rites. Whoever are present, adore the deity as bidden, and all repeat the words of the priest over again, and the descendants of Aeneas give a pious omen, both with their feelings and in their words. To these the god shows favor, and with crest erected, he gives a hiss, a sure sign, repeated thrice with his vibrating tongue. Then he glides down the polished steps, and turns back his head, and about to depart, he looks back upon his ancient altars, and salutes his accustomed abode, and the temple that he has inhabited for so long. Then, with his vast bulk, he glides along the ground covered with the strewn flowers, and coils his folds, and through the middle of the city repairs to the harbor protected by its winding quay. Here he stops, and seeming to dismiss his train and the dutiful attendance of the accompanying crowd, with a calm countenance, he places his body in the Ausonian ship. It is aware of the weight of the god, and the ship now laden with the divinity for its cargo, the descendants of Aeneas rejoice, and a bull having first been slain on the seashore, they loosen the twisted cables of the ship decorated with garlands. A gentle breeze has now propelled the ship. The god is conspicuous aloft, and pressing upon the curved stern with his neck laid upon it, he looks down upon the azure waters, and with the gentle zephyrs along the Ionian Sea on the sixth rising of the daughter of Pallas, he reaches Italy, and is carried along the Licinian shores, ennobled by the temple of the goddess Hera and the Cilician coasts. He leaves Iapygia behind, and flies from the Amphissian rocks with the oars on the left side. On the right side he passes by the steep Sarania and Romecium and Colin and Neritia, and he crosses the sea and the straits of the Sicilian Pelorus, and the homes of the king the grandson of Hippotas and the mines of Temesa, and then he heads for Lucosia and the rose beds of the warm Paestum. Then he coasts by Capri and the promontory of Athena, and the hills ennobled with the Serentine vines, and the city of Hercules and Stabii and Parthenope made for retirement, and after it the temple of the Cumi Sibyl. Next, the warm springs are passed by, and Linternum, that bears mastic trees, and then Vulturnus, that carries much sand along with its tide, and Sinuessa, that abounds with snow-white snakes, and the pestilential Minturni, and she for whom her foster child erected the tomb, and the home of Antiphates, and Troches, surrounded by the marsh, and the land of Circe and Antium, with its rocky coast. After the sailors have steered the sail-bearing ship here, for now the sea is stirred up, the deity unfolds his coils, and gliding with many a fold and in vast coils, he enters the temple of his parent, that borders the yellow shore. The sea now calmed, the god of Epidaurus leaves the altars of his father, and having enjoyed the hospitality of the deity related to him, he furrows the sands of the seashore with the dragging of his rattling scales, and reclining against the helm of the ship, he places his head upon the high stern, until he comes to Castrum and the sacred homes of Lavinium and the mouths of the Tiber. Here all the people indiscriminately, a crowd of both women and men, rush to meet him, they too Hestia, who tend your fires, and with joyous shouts they welcome the god. And where the swift ship is steered through the outgoing tide, altars being erected in a line, the frankincense crackles along the banks on either side, and perfumes the air with its smoke. The slaughtered victim too, with its blood makes warm the knives thrust into it. And now he has entered Rome, the ruler of the world. The serpent rises erect and lifts his neck that reclines against the top of the mast and looks around for a dwelling suited for himself. There is a spot where the river flowing around is divided into two parts. It is called the island. The river in the direction of each side extends its arms of equal length, the dry land lying in the middle. Here the serpent, son of Phoebus, betakes himself from the Latian ship, and he puts an end to the morning, having resumed his celestial form. And thus did he come, the restorer of health, to the city. And yet he came as a stranger to our temples. Caesar is a deity in his own city. His distinction in both war and peace, his triumphs ending wars, his domestic governance, and the swift glory of his exploits did not contribute more to his transformation into a new planet and a star with a brilliant trail than his own offspring did. For of all Caesar's deeds, none is more noble than that he was the father of our Caesar. Was it, indeed, a greater thing to have conquered the Britons surrounded by the ocean, to have steered his victorious ships along the seven-mouthed streams of the papyrus-bearing Nile, to have added to the people of Quirinus the rebellious Numidians and Cyniphian Juba, and Pontus proud of the fame of Mithridates, and to have deserved many triumphs, and to have enjoyed some, than it was to have been the father of such a great personage, under whose guardianship over the world you, ye gods above, have shown excessive care for the human race? That he then might not be born from mortal seed, it was fitting that Julius should be made a divinity. When the resplendent mother of Aeneas realized this, and when she saw that a sad death was being prepared for the pontiff, and that the arms of the conspirators were being brandished, she turned pale and said to each of the deities as she met them, "Behold, how vast is the scale on which treason is plotted against me, and with how great perfidy that life is sought, which alone remains for me from the Dardanian Iulus. Shall I alone be eternally harassed by justified anxieties? I, whom at one time the Caledonian spear of the son of Titius is wounding, and at another time the walls of Troy, defended in vain, are grieving? I, who have seen my son driven about in protracted wanderings, tossed on the ocean, entering the abodes of the departed, and waging war with Turnus, or, if we confess the truth, with Hera rather? But why am I now recalling the ancient misfortunes of my own offspring? Present apprehensions do not allow me to remember things of former days. Against me, you see how the impious swords are now being sharpened. Avert them, I entreat. Prevent this crime, and do not, by the murder of the priest, extinguish the flames of Hestia." Aphrodite, filled with anxiety, expressed these words in vain throughout the heavens, and she moved the gods above. Although they were unable to thwart the iron decrees of the aged sisters, they nonetheless provided unmistakable signs of impending disaster. It is said that the sound of arms echoing amid the black clouds and the dreadful blasts of the trumpet and clarions heard through the heavens forewarned men of the crime. The sun's sad face also cast a pallid light on the alarmed earth. Often torches seemed to be burning among the stars, often drops of blood fell in the showers. The azure-colored morning star had its light tinted with a dark iron color. The chariot of the moon was sprinkled with blood. The Stygian owl gave omens of ill in 1,000 places. In 1,000 places the ivory statues wept. Dirges, too, are said to have been heard, and threatening words in the sacred groves. No sacrifice gave a good omen. The entrails also showed that great upheavals were imminent, and the liver's extremity was found cut off among the entrails. They also say that in the forum and around the houses and the temples of the gods, the dogs were howling at night, and that the ghosts of the departed were walking, and that the city was shaken by earthquakes. But still, the warnings of the gods could not prevent treachery and the approach of fate, and drawn swords were brought into a temple, and no other place in the entire city than the Senate house pleased them for this crime and this atrocious murder. Then Cytherea beat her breast with both her hands, and tried to hide the descendant of Aeneas in a cloud, in which, long ago, Paris was carried away from the hostile son of Atreus, and Aeneas had escaped from the sword of Diomedes. In such words did her father Zeus address her. Do you, my daughter, unaided, attempt to change the insurmountable decrees of fate? You yourself may enter the abode of the three sisters, and there you will behold the record of future events, wrought with vast labor, of brass and of solid iron. These, safe and destined for eternity, fear neither the thundering shock of the heavens, nor the rage of the lightnings, nor any source of destruction. There you will find the destinies of your descendants engraved in everlasting adamant. I myself have read them, and I have marked them in my mind. I will repeat them, so that you may not still be ignorant of the future. He on whose account, Cytherea, you are thus anxious, has completed his time, those years being ended which he owed to the earth. You, with his son, who, as the heir to his glory, will bear the burden of government devolving on him, will cause him, as a deity, to reach the heavens, and to be worshipped in temples, and he, as a most valiant avenger of his murdered parent, will have us to aid him in his battles. The conquered walls of Mutina, besieged under his auspices, shall sue for peace. Pharsalia shall be sensible of him, and Philippi, again drenched with Emathian gore, and the name of one renowned as great, shall be subdued in the Sicilian waves. The Egyptian dame too, the wife of the Roman general, shall fall, vainly trusting in that alliance, and in vain shall she threaten that our own capital shall be obedient to her Canopus. Why should I recount to you the regions of barbarism, and nations situated in either ocean? Whatever the habitable world contains shall be his, the sea too shall be subject to him. Peace being granted to the earth, he will turn his attention to civil rights, and as a most upright legislator, he will enact laws. After his own example, too, will he regulate manners, and looking forward to the days of future time and of his coming posterity, he will order the offspring born of his hallowed wife to assume both his own name and his cares. Nor shall he, until as an aged man he shall have equaled his glories with like years, arrive at the abodes of heaven and his kindred stars. Meanwhile, change this soul, snatched from the murdered body, into a beam of light, so that eternally the deified Julius may look down from his lofty abode upon our capital and forum. No sooner had he spoken these words, when the friendly Aphrodite, unseen by all, stood in the middle of the Senate house. She took the soul, just released from the body, from her own Caesar's limbs, and not allowing it to dissolve into thin air, she carried it among the stars of heaven. As she carried it, she noticed it took on a trail of light and became inflamed, and she let it go from her chest. It flies above the moon, and as a star it shines, carrying a flaming tail with a long path. As he sees his son's illustrious deeds, he admits they are greater than his own, and rejoices that he is surpassed by him. Even though Augustus forbids his own actions to be praised before those of his father, Fame, in her freedom and not subject to any commands, prefers him against his will, and in this one point she disobeys him. Thus Atreus yields to the glories of the great Agamemnon. Thus Theseus surpasses Aegeus, and thus Achilles surpasses Peleus. Finally, to use examples that match themselves, Saturn is also inferior to Zeus. Zeus rules the heavens and the realms of the threefold world. The earth is under Augustus. Each of them is a father and a ruler. You gods, the companions of Aeneas, for whom both the sword and the flames made a way, and you, native deities, and Quirinus, the father of the city, and Gradivus, the son of the invincible Quirinus and Hestia, held sacred among Caesar's household gods, and with Caesar's Hestia, Phoebus, enshrined in your home, and Zeus, who holds the Tarpeian heights aloft, and whatever other deities it is lawful and righteous for a poet to invoke, may that day be late, and extended beyond my life, on which Augustus, leaving the world he rules, shall approach the heavens. And when gone, may he listen favorably to those who invoke him. And now I have completed a work, which neither the wrath of Zeus, nor fire, nor sword, nor the ravages of time will be able to destroy. Let that day, which has power only over this body of mine, end the term of my uncertain life when it will. Yet, in my better part, I shall be raised immortal above the high stars, and my name shall be indelible. And wherever Roman power extends throughout the conquered earth, I shall be read by the lips of nations, and if the predictions of poets have any truth, I shall survive in fame throughout all ages.